Welcome to the Balkan Talks, where we discuss everything business and news related to the Western Balkans. The Balkan Talks is brought to you by WBBG, your partner for doing business in the Western Balkans region. Enjoy the episode.
What kind of message does this send to the other countries? For example, Serbia, who you mentioned, about the Kosovo thing.
And they'll probably be like, why should we reform when Northern Macedonia did so?
Right. So
but we didn't get to join anyways.
Exactly. So they're demanding for Serbia to recognize Kosovo because that's one of the things that they are asking them to do to be able
It's a demand. It's a demand in order to continue the process.
Right. So what kind of message does that send?
And that's the reason why the EU, or at least the EU, why the member states who have been opponents have gotten a lot of backlash. Like Macron got a lot of backlash for blocking North Macedonia's admission, or at least continuing the process of negotiating admission, because they, like a lot of people, what you are saying, say like, hello, we did the things, we, like, of all things, we changed the bloody name of our country, to please you, and still we're not getting in. And that's very treacherous. Sani, how lovely to see you again.
Thanks, I guess.
Well, I always like seeing you. Especially in this setting.
In this setting, it's amazing. It is, because we have a podcast and it seems to be, people seem to like it a little bit.
We've received a lot of positive replies on our previous episode.
The last one was really good.
It's really good.
So one thing before we continue with the episode is I'm kind of sick. So maybe you can hear that in my voice, right? So I'm
please leave sad replies for Sani's sickness.
F's in the chat.
Yeah.
for my voice. And maybe we should explain a little bit more about the current format that we're choosing, actually.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sani.
So for those of you that actually saw for our listeners that actually saw the first the videos that we posted on Facebook asking you for questions, and by the way, we received some questions which we will be answering later in the
thank you very much for sending in questions.
Thank you.
They were lovely, and we appreciate the feedback. So
Definitely.
Always fun.
So we're going to do 2 podcasts every month now instead of 1. So we're going to increase the frequency, which is really good.
So more of us. I
know you love hearing our voices.
Everybody loves more of us.
Everybody loves more of us, I think.
That should be a name for like a sitcom. Everybody loves more of us.
I think that's a really corny name, but maybe it'll fly.
But it's like a 90s sitcom, like
the Friends.
Friends vibe, that's what you want.
Right. So let me just get back to my explanation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry.
No worries. I forgive you. So we're going to do 2 podcasts every month, but we're going to still keep the format of 1 guest every month. So 1 podcast is going to be basically a guest. Like last time we had Sander Schimmelpenninck. And this time we're going to be just you and I, Sandro and Sanir, talking about some recent events, news, whatever. And we're going to be answering some questions, and 1 extra segment, which I'm unsure if we'll be able to do this episode, but maybe we can announce it at the end. We'll see. The big thing that we talked about in the strategy session with companies and organizations and giving them awards.
You're even like getting me intrigued, but let's save that for the end if we have time.
Right. Okay. So that's going to be the format. So 2 podcasts every month. So that's first things first. That's out of the way. Let's get back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, because we have some interesting stuff to talk about. Because you've been watching the news recently. You've seen
who's leaving us.
A lot of people are leaving me every day, but most people come back every time.
Do they?
But there's one country that's leaving us.
And we know which country that is, of course.
It's the beautiful country of Great Britain.
Yeah, the UK.
The UK.
Yeah.
We'll be missing them.
Yeah, man. They're fucking going off into the Atlantic Ocean without us.
Into the abyss.
By the way, I'm not going to beep every F word I use. But anyway,
Great.
they're leaving us.
Yeah, but so they are leaving us. And one of the things that we do see in Europe is that, in general, we did a podcast last season, with Andreas Sentover about the European elections. So that time we talked about Europe a little bit, but it's been like a year ago by now. And we thought it would be good to talk about Europe again and what is the situation now with the enlargement towards the Western Balkans, because we still have a lot of countries there who are not EU members. We have things changing now in a rapid pace. We see the UK leaving. That's one recent development, but we see also other things happening. You see Croatia as the chair of the EU this half year.
Okay.
That's going to be interesting. You have a new summit in May, I believe, in Zagreb, which is going to be about enlargement for a large part.
Yeah. So this is a lot of stuff happening. And just to throw this in there as well, this is actually one of your specialties, isn't it, Sandro? For those of you who don't know.
I finished my master's in international European governance, and I also did my master thesis on the specific case of Bosnia and Herzegovina in relationship with EU enlargement process. And so that will be one part of the discussion here. We'll be talking about Bosnia, but we'll also be talking about all the other countries in the current situation and what is happening there. So I think
I'm just establishing your authority a little bit.
Thank you.
Because I'm just a layman and I have opinions. I'm like a populist, basically yelling stuff. But
you're basically the average European,
right? That's me.
Yeah.
So I don't know what.
So you're playing the average European today.
Is good for. Yeah, that's me.
Good.
Carry on, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. That's fine. I think it's good that people know we'll be talking about this, and for the people who are watching video right now, that will be great what you just did. So that's something that we'll be talking about. But maybe good that's something you do know, because you might not be the biggest political monster in this room today, but you do know business and you do know economics, and you can probably explain why is it important that we're talking about EU enlargement, EU in general, when it comes to the Western Balkans, when it comes to prosperity and all of those things. Sani, why is it important that these non-EU countries in the Western Balkans become member states sooner than later?
Well, I think it's because if you include the countries if they gain access to the European Union, they gain access to the market. There's going to be an increase in trust by countries outside of the region to do trade and business and investments in these countries, which is very important for economic development, which is important for business, for big business and small business like entrepreneurs and all that. And, I think we've seen some developments in that part, positive developments, but I think because of these benefits that we saw, for example, other Eastern European countries obtain in the past 15 years as they gained access to the EU, actually became members of the EU, their economies improved drastically. So that was a really good development for them when it comes to developing not just their economy, but their infrastructure, their political landscape, education, and all these things, which, for those of you who are still, or not even still living in the Balkans, but from the Balkans, the situation in a lot of places. It's very important that, we improve these things, and EU is one of the paths forward. If these countries can meet the standards that the EU is asking for.
Yeah, I think that's the key word, like standards is also always crucial.
Yeah.
But I think like stability and trust, those are like the two key words always for me, because on one end, like when you want to become an EU member, we'll be talking about that more extensively later. But if you want to become a member, you have to fulfill certain standards. You have to do certain reforms. You have to make progress in that sense. And why they have to do that? Because they have to get uplifted to the EU standard of those regulations, which in turn create trust for companies. Because if companies can rely on certain standards being implemented on one end, but also being upheld, there has to be a system of rule of law. There has to be a judicial system which enforces these standards where necessary. And once that is implemented and done so successfully, you create a business climate which, when we say, easy to do business and make it more attractive for investment from outside the region, you have to do those things. And you've seen what happened to countries like Romania and Bulgaria. I think that's like 15 years ago, roughly. But Croatia also quite relatively recently. Slovenia has been longer ago. But you see that those countries have benefited from becoming a EU member state.
Yeah.
So I think those things have to be very important for us to take into account. Like, this is why we're talking about this.
Yeah, definitely. So one other thing that you could say in this situation is also the it kind of ties into the trust thing that we mentioned. Image is really important.
Yeah.
So there's still this image of not being a safe region or stable region for doing business, or even for travel, or safe, or whatever. So, which is, for those of us who know and those of us who've seen it and been there, it's not true. It's nonsense. It's greatly stable. It's good. Safe. Basically, you can travel there. You can do business there. It's going to be things are going to be different than what you're used to when you're used to the Netherlands. But we have to say, in that sense, that the Netherlands is a very exceptional place when it comes to systems and organization. It's very high quality and high standard, even more so than other European countries, let's say.
Yeah, but we have to watch out. Like, one thing we don't want to do is say that everything in the Western Balkans has to be like the Netherlands or other Western countries.
That's not what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know. But like, I really want to emphasize, we should not use our Western glasses and look with those glasses towards Eastern and Southern Europe. But the point is, I think what you were trying to say probably is you want to create a climate which is positive for business.
Definitely. So I was at this this conference last week, which was
the ambassadors conference here in the Netherlands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I talked to a few people just conversationally about, casually, let's say, about the Balkans, and it's really an image thing. And I think accession, so joining the EU, would change that image, because I don't feel, obviously I don't know all of the countries in Europe, but I don't feel that Romania or Bulgaria is so drastically different than one of the countries in the Western Balkans. However, because they joined the EU back when, let's be honest, the EU had very much lower standards.
Yeah, no, one of the key takeaways from one of the sources I used extensively for my master thesis, they also always said, if Romania and Bulgaria applied to enter the EU today, they would never be accepted.
Exactly. So, and that's nothing on the countries, by the way. So we have Bulgarian and Romanian listeners, don't worry, but we love you guys. But I mean, it's just the fact that those countries joined when they did changed the image in the minds of a lot of people in the West. More companies go there now. It's not weird to do business there, but it's still kind of weird doing business in Serbia or Bosnia or whatever, Albania.
You heard from Sander, who was here on the last podcast. He said when he told people, I'm going to go to Croatia, his family and friends were like, what are you doing there? Why are you going there? Well, that's even Croatia, which is more Western, let's say, in a lot of people's minds than Serbia or Northern Macedonia or Albania.
And that's an EU country.
Yeah.
Right. So that says something, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's one. So my whole point was basically that's one additional and very important aspect, an advantage of joining the EU, the reason why these countries need to do their best to try and get into the bloc. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, okay. That's a good start. I think we're really getting into the topic. What is maybe also good to give to our listeners some kind of overview for the people who are not very familiar with the current situation. So when we look at the Western Balkan states, we see that Slovenia, they joined the EU first in 2004. They became the first member.
Yeah.
Obviously, Slovenia is kind of a outlier when it comes to the average of the Western Balkan states. So somewhere it is historically in general. So I think it's not very weird that they joined earlier. Croatia joined in 2013. They were more recent, and that you see that they are experiencing now, the benefits and the growth. And you see that when those systems, the bureaucratic systems and the image in the EU is changing, that benefits that country. Now it's the EU chair, so that's also very unique. Like first time, a Western Balkan state is the chair of the EU, which is very interesting to see. When we look to the other countries, we see that currently Albania and North Macedonia are official candidates. They're actually talking about, joining, and we see a lot of developments happening there about them joining. It's been difficult with France blocking a lot of those accessions, and also the Netherlands and Denmark being critical on Albania.
Right.
So that's what we see on that side. We see Serbia and Montenegro. They are still candidates. Candidate states who are negotiating on the chapters. We'll get there later too, and we see Bosnia and Kosovo who are still potential candidate states. Right, so I always find this a weird construct. You have candidates and you have potential candidates, which is sounds a bit double, doesn't it? Like potential candidate. Well, anyway, is the system they use, and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So also, if you would like to try to put some, time and time paths on when would each country join, that will be also roughly, but you're never sure, but that will be roughly the time period when you're looking forward 5, 10, 20 years, who will be joining.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe also good because I just used a few terms about how those proceedings go.
Yeah.
So the way joining the EU goes is that first, in the process of negotiations, you have, the intent. A country has to express the intent that they want to join. They have to say that, okay, I want to join you guys. And that usually starts with some preliminary agreements. So there we go. Preliminary agreements, trade deals and making import-export easier, having some kind of working together already. Then after that, you get the process of implementing reforms. So the EU has those certain standards which you have to meet, and you have to implement reforms which you use to adhere to the chapters which the EU has. The EU calls them chapters. So on every topic, which is like a policy field. So let's say, and it goes very micro. So it goes fishery, agriculture, can go to mining, can go to IT infrastructure, can go to taxes, can go to rule of law.
These are the chapters?
These are the chapters.
Chapter IT or chapter mining or chapter this or that.
It will be a bit bigger than IT, I think, but it's about, sectors and policy fields, which need regulation. So you also have energy, you have, trade is one, you have...
It's a bit bigger than...
Yeah, a bit bigger.
Okay.
But there are 35. So it's not like there are like 5 chapters, it's 35 chapters. And you have to implement reforms to meet the requirements on the chapters on one end. And there are also negotiations within each chapter.
But I feel that this has been changing a lot recently. And the reason why we're talking about this topic is, so recent events from last year was the big discussion about the name of Northern Macedonia.
Yeah.
So it was a really hot topic in the Balkans. The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Greece, they were fighting for a very long time about the name. And one of the demands was for Northern Macedonia, the Republic of Northern Macedonia. The map's up to date.
Yeah, the map's up to date. So
Republic
that's good.
of Northern Macedonia. So when you see that they wanted the country to change its name, and it did eventually. They really showed their willingness to cooperate, to join the EU. And then when they did, for some reason, maybe you can enlighten us on this topic, like the way you see this. For some reason, the demands became harsher after that. So they weren't rewarded for it. Actually, these countries that we mentioned earlier, including the Netherlands, where we both live, they said like, look, no, it's not enough. Still, you need to do all these other things. And now, I think one of the main reasons for this podcast topic, let's say, is the Brexit that we saw in articles recently might have again changed the mindset of EU about accession, basically making it easier again. So how do you look at this? I mean, it seems kind of
it's difficult.
It's schizophrenic. Let's say it's like no, yes, no, okay, yes, yes. Let's show the Brits, we can be big and strong again by taking or whatever. That's how I.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean.
It's a very big discussion. You are touching the right point, which is the difficult point of, the European Union is always in a battle when it comes to enlargement on what I would like to call like carrot and stick. Like on one end, you have to offer sufficient carrot to potential member states to have the willingness to implement reforms, because like a lot of reforms which are necessary are painful, and the ruling parties who are in power don't always, let's say, get rewarded electorally for those reforms. On the other end, you also have to have enough of a stick to make the bar high enough, so not to let everybody join. You still have to be critical.
But who's everybody? It's like literally these countries left. I mean, who's everybody? Like
that's true.
We know who it is.
But like the thing that's behind it is obviously like other member states saying like we had to fulfill it to these standards 5 years ago.
Yeah, but they didn't. They didn't though.
And that's difficult. That's very difficult to put your finger on, because like those standards shift the whole time. That's what you also said. Like
exactly
the requirements and chapters change over time, which makes negotiations sometimes very difficult, because like recent developments and whatever can influence it. On the other end, what you also said about Greece and Northern Macedonia, that's like the extra demands or the extra other X factors which can exist in those discussions. Like you have a few in the Western Balkans. So you had the discussion with Greece and Northern Macedonia about the country name. You have the discussion between Serbia and Kosovo, obviously, about autonomy and borders and all of those things.
Right. So let's say if I can jump in right there. So we see what happened sort of with the name change of Northern Macedonia. They changed their name. The EU started to play hard again, like hard to get, like. What kind of message does this send to the other countries? For example, Serbia, who you mentioned, about the Kosovo thing.
And they'll probably be like, why should we reform when Northern Macedonia did so?
Right. So
but didn't get to join anyways.
Exactly. So they're demanding for Serbia to recognize Kosovo, because that's one of the things that they are asking them to do to be able
It's a demand. It's a demand in order to continue the process.
Right. Right. So what kind of message does that send?
And that's the reason why the EU, or at least the EU, why the member states who have been opponents have gotten a lot of backlash. Like Macron got a lot of backlash for blocking North Macedonia's admission, or at least continuing the process of negotiating admission, because they, like a lot of people, what you are saying, say like, hello, we did the things, like of all things, we changed the bloody name of our country, to please you, and still we're not getting in. And that's very treacherous, because indeed what you're saying, like I would also, if I were Serbian, I would be like, why would I let Kosovo go? Let's say I'm a nationalist Serbian. Why would I let Kosovo go if Northern Macedonia, if there are no guarantees of getting in? And that's a discussion which is like going on all the time in the EU, like between the carrot and the stick, having enough stuff, but also being stringent. And sometimes it overshoots on one or the other side. And I really thought with North Macedonia now, the French overshot their line, obviously.
I mean, my opinion, this is just my opinion, so don't shoot me for this. But
the average European,
I think the French have bigger problems in their own country to be messing around with, these kinds of things. Macron, let's say. What does the Brexit mean, though? So what effect will that have? Because see, I think the EU is now ready to show the UK, they want to play strong now. They want to show the UK and the world now what they can do. They want to show some power, some influence. And it seems like it shifted. Like there was an article last week, right, about this. Like, what does this mean what does Brexit mean for the Western Balkans?
So Brexit shifts the power balance a lot in the EU. So the UK was always like one of the more neutral players within the European dynamic. So you always saw that France and Germany, they would hold together quite strongly. They were like in negotiations because of history and everything. They would cling together quite closely. And the UK, together with the Netherlands, actually, were always trying to be some kind of a broker, a bit more neutral player. And they would always try to peel Germany away from the clinging hands of France to get some things done in the EU. So now when the UK is leaving, you see that the French-German axis, as it's called, like that cooperation, has become a lot harder to break, which is going to make them more influential in European negotiations. What does it mean for the Western Balkans? It means for the Western Balkans two things. On one end, you're more dependent on this axis. So you're also more dependent on what the French think. That's why we see the French blocking the entry of North Macedonia and Albania to be a lot more significant than if the UK was still around, because the UK was one of the traditional three big players in those negotiations. On the other end, and that is to the benefit of the Western Balkan countries, is that because of the UK leaving, the EU indeed wants to, fortify its position more. And that's why we do think that there will be more energy in the enlargement discussion now again to enlarge, because you see that the attention that the larger European unification process, the bringing it together, is getting, that has been weakened a bit by Brexit, because one of the biggest players left. So you want to show people that people still want to join, that people still want to come in. And the Western Balkans is, as you said, like the last geographically close region in the EU, which can join. And that will be the next battleground for joining. But it's still a battleground, because the UK is obviously trying to peel away countries from the European grasp. They're trying to make all of these bilateral trade agreements now everywhere to fortify their position. That's going to be very difficult. So that's one game that's being played. And on the other end, which we also should like touch upon, which is one of the reasons which has made EU accession also difficult for countries from the Western Balkans, is the influence of outside players who are not European. So Russia, Turkey, China, which is also happening there.
Right. So now you have the EU, which was, let's say, not as proactive in the last 10, 15 years in the Western Balkans, I would say.
They've been silent since the fourth enlargement, basically.
Right. Yeah. They've not really been proactive. Now you've got... And you've had in the recent years, especially since the Trump election, I think, America regaining their interest in the Western Balkans, Russia already at it for a while now, China with their investments. A few years back, you had the one of the Greek ports.
Yeah, Piraeus, which was bought by China.
Right. And now China's investing in the Balkans when it comes to infrastructure, energy.
Belt Road Initiative.
Exactly. All these things. Everybody sees this. So, of course, there's loads of money coming in from the Middle East as well. So there's money and influence, let's say, pouring into that region from everywhere. So it's a geopolitical battleground of sorts.
Has it ever not been?
Has it ever not been? Well, no. That's what it makes it what it is. But
the way how the Austro-Hungarians called the Balkans.
Tell me.
They called it, the barrel which if you put a spark on it, which explodes.
Oh, right.
The explosive barrel of Europe.
Oh,
that was the Balkans.
Yeah, but that was at that time, though. It wasn't. It was at the time dependent. It was time context.
True. But the 90s did not, falsify their statement. Let's put it that way.
That was after some other things happened.
Anyways, we digress.
Yeah. So, what was I saying? I was saying that also the UK now, obviously, because it left the EU, the UK ambassador to Bosnia last week also said the UK is now going to lessen their interest in the Balkans, in Bosnia, for example.
That's peeling away.
Exactly. So now there's an extra player who has special interests in the region. So it's going to become really difficult. And I think that's also one of the reasons that the EU now is regaining their interest.
Of course, that's the game that's being played.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned earlier, I think Croatia is becoming the chair for the next half year at the
current half year. So January to summer.
I see. So they're a Balkan country, and that's going to have some impact. So what do you think that's going to mean for the region?
So the interesting
thing... What can it mean?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that Croatia is the chair now. So, and one of the strongest powers you have as the EU chair is that you have the what we political scientists like to call the agenda setting power. So you basically, as the chair, have a lot of influence over what gets discussed. You know, what topics get discussed in the Council, in the EU, and that's very important when it comes to issues like enlargement, which haven't been on the agenda for a long time. We saw for the last time in 2018, we had the last summit in Sofia, which was the Western Balkan summit, talking about these topics. And we saw there wasn't a lot of movement. It was also, of course, in the period that Brexit was in the air and a lot of uncertainty. But now with Croatia being, one of the Western Balkan countries also, who have a lot of experience with the region, who have their network, they are going to organize a summit in Zagreb too. And we're really going to see now what impact that this is going to have. So expectations now are really on the Croatians to put enlargement on the agenda. Mm-hmm. It's also interesting for them to, have more neighbors in the EU. It's simply economic interest too, but also, of course, geopolitical interest, always a player in the Western Balkans. And my personal guess will be that Croatia will make a move to put enlargement more, put it higher on the agenda, and to try to make sure that it happens at least for North Macedonia for in a few years. That will be the first move.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah, because I was going to say, Croatia has, of course, historically rivaled kind of Serbia, and Bosnia is there as well. They have their interests there as well. So so obviously I understand Northern Macedonia, but when it comes to these neighboring countries, what do you think? How do you think they'll act? Because it's not just economic. You also got the border crisis, and there's loads of migrants in Serbia and in Bosnia, and Croatia is basically they're preventing. They're acting as the border of Europe. So how do you think they'll act towards Serbia and Bosnia?
I think it's difficult when it comes to those countries because when you look towards accession, you have to really look at the process. And those countries like Serbia and Bosnia are like a lot further behind in the process than North Macedonia and Albania are. So it will be logical for Croatia to focus their energy first on those countries because they are
fruit.
Yeah, also that, but also because that way you can create a dynamic of, very simply said, if Albania and North Macedonia join the EU, they can also continue to lobby for the other countries to join. So together you're stronger. Yeah. Now it's Croatia and a little bit of Slovenia alone trying to pull the process more towards enlargement. So it's also very much about enlarging your numbers in that sense. At least that's my opinion.
Okay.
And the other thing is, which I mentioned before, or tried to mention, like Serbia and Bosnia specifically have these lingering issues. Like Serbia has the Kosovo question, how are they going to work out, an agreement and independence and all of those questions. And Bosnia still has, double state in a state system, put into place by Dayton. So that system, if that was what my thesis was about. My conclusion from the thesis was Bosnia probably won't be able to become an EU member as long as that system, that federal system, in its current form, is in place.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things in the structure, like ethnic quotas and all those things, and not being able to uphold certain judicial standards, which will, effectively render them unable to become an EU member.
Yeah.
So, long story short, Croatia will probably first focus on North Macedonia and Albania, which is rightfully so, if you ask me.
Okay, yeah. That will make sense, I guess, And it's not like... the Bosnians are in any hurry, let's say.
But they also have their own problems to fix, of course. But Croatia just has a very interesting role right now. And if you want to create a parallel to what is happening in the Netherlands because Croatia, like I read this interesting article calling Croatia the next Netherlands of the South. And why are they saying this? It's because the Netherlands has, what I explained earlier, traditionally with the UK been the natural brokers in the EU when it came to agreements and creating balances, between continental, Anglo-Saxon, more northern, southern interest, but mostly in the western and northern parts, so Scandinavia, UK, France, Germany. They've very much been a broker who worked very pragmatically to get agreements done, like just creating alliances and let's say, okay, us together, we're going to do this and get it done. In the South, there isn't a real player who has the same position. It's also because they're mostly bigger countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
What kind of countries?
Bigger countries.
Bigger.
Quite big countries.
Right. Yeah.
But Croatia, in a certain sense, is very similar to the Netherlands as it's one of the smaller countries. It is very also dependent on outside, what happens for their economy. It's very export and very tourist and all those things.
Trade and all that, yeah.
Oriented when it comes to their economy. That makes it interesting.
Yeah.
And also because they have this traditional position being one of the Western Balkan states, but also being a bit of a bridge between, the old centrist Habsburg history, but also the Slavic world and the Italian Mediterranean world. They've been very much this crossroad, which makes them a natural player to be the future broker. And I think they're going to use that position now with Chair 2 to enhance that, to fortify themselves as the future broker for the South. And if they do that successfully and smartly, and I've seen a few things, they've been doing it well the last 2 months. I'm really optimistic about their future geopolitical position within the EU.
Okay. Yeah, I hope they make the right moves, let's say, because, we'll see. It's not a long time, a half year. They're going to have to make some really big moves fast, let's say.
It's always half year, but you'll be surprised what you can put on the agenda in half year in the EU. Of course, it goes slowly, but you sometimes just need to make the right moves, and then you'll have have a lot of power in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you think of like when you go back to the outside players? So you mentioned China,
the big boys.
Yeah, you mentioned the Piraeus Road.
Yeah, like the Belt Road Initiative, but Piraeus is a good example. So like China obviously is very busy with enhancing their economic influence all over the world.
Right.
So you see it in Africa, buying places with resources, and like the Belt Road Initiative refers to a very, sometimes it's a bit nasty process which the Chinese do, is that they go to certain countries which might have questionable dictators in Africa mostly, and then they hand them over loans. So they loan them certain amounts of money to do certain projects, but they know that the country will never be able to pay back the loan, and they put in like a clause that if they don't pay back the money, that what they built with the money, or anyways of the highways or factories, become Chinese, like state owned. So it's basically some kind of economic colonialism. It's quite similar to what we did roughly as a colonial powers like 100 years ago, without like giving it to them, but just taking it. But same principle of like economic colonialism.
Same but different.
Same but different. And they've also, of course, been looking towards the Balkan region. Like they bought Piraeus. It was the same thing. They loaned Greece money. Mm-hmm. They couldn't pay it back. Piraeus became Chinese. That's the way it went.
Yeah.
And that it's very interesting because Piraeus is a very strategic harbor in the Mediterranean. And it effectively gave the Chinese a very strategic position in the region. And they, of course, also looking up north to the Western Balkans, trying to buy strategic or get a hold of strategic factories, places. There are a lot of resources. We recently got an article written by Theodora about lithium in Serbia. So go check that out if you haven't.
Definitely. So read about lithium and Tesla and all that. It's nice.
Great article by Theodora.
Thank you, Theodora.
Yeah, so that's the Chinese. Turkey and Russia, of course, more historically.
You know something. I feel like because the Western Balkans countries are not as organized, not as, let's say, easily managed. than other countries, it makes it harder for outside powers to gain control of them. You know what I mean?
Is this your U.S. chaos theory? Or
This is my chaos theory.
Explain, please.
Well, I mean, like I said, like, okay, we're Bosnian, right? So that's no secret.
That was no secret.
But from what I've seen in Bosnia for the past, let's say, 10 years, I've seen Chinese, I've seen, Arabs, I've seen Russians, and it doesn't seem like all of them are sticking around. Like, they come in waves and then they kind of leave, because not entirely, but it kind of seems like it doesn't go as well as they hope it goes because of all the different things that they run into. Like, you can't just waltz in because the people there aren't organized and they don't get along politically all that well. So you can't really, but that's just the feeling I have,
Yeah, well, like there is some truth to that. It's difficult. But still, you see nudges like towards certain directions, which can be very impactful.
I hope it goes towards the EU path. That's my hope.
That's something you are seeing now. You see it more prominently now. But like still, like look the way Serbia functioned like 10 years ago. Still, they were still more pro-Russian than pro-Serbian, if you ask me, because of course their historical relationship with Russia has been very big. And of course, Russia has interest in having a strategic partner in the Balkans, and Serbia has been their ally for, last 200 years, as far as I can tell, even longer maybe. So they've always had interest in the region, and you see always like Russian influence in Serbia, and Serbia had to make the very difficult decision of, on one end going towards the European road, and then on the other end going towards the Russian road, or like keeping on the Russian road. And that's why, what I said in the beginning, the political parties and the leaders in power in those countries, if they want to switch to the European road or put that down more prominently, they have to do certain reforms, do certain things, which are not always popular with
the people.
All the people or more traditional parts of the population, let's put it that way. So that's always a difficult game.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you get Turkey, which is always interesting.
Turkey, man.
Special role in the Balkans.
They're also Balkans. We haven't really talked about, they're not Western Balkans though. Yeah.
Well, they owned practically all of it for 500 years. So that was history.
We can ask them about that sometimes. Yeah. Maybe get a historian on.
When it comes to do the nudging part, you see Turkey. Turkey just one of the best examples, I think, in this sense is how Erdogan, I think it was a few years ago, not even that long. I think it was last year. He held a speech in Europe. Like he wanted to have a speech in Europe to show his presence, and that's a geopolitical power move, like out of the book. And he chose Sarajevo to hold that speech because of course there is a certain following there, a certain power base which is still very pro-Turkish. You see it all over the world, and like I'm not gonna put any like value or any judgment on him doing that. It's of course his right, but it is a very clear political power move, geopolitical power move by the Turkish government to go into Bosnia and Herzegovina to show the EU like, hello, we're here, and see how close we can get to you, without any problems. Because of course, Turkish ministers and anything have had problems going to other EU countries. But Bosnia was free game for them to go there because they have a certain part,
of course,
which supports them.
Yeah, definitely. And also Russia, by the way. So the Russians are in Bosnia and in Serbia, same thing.
So like the game is played everywhere. Like let's be honest. So that's
we got the Americans as well, though not as prominent maybe.
Well, they're playing their game. Well, they were very important, of course, in the post-war years. So, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina, like the EU or like the US.
Kosovo now as well, I think.
Kosovo, very long time. It's becoming a bit less. Like the US has...
They have their presence. They're very, I think from what I've read, they have a really strong presence in Kosovo.
They do. But that's also, of course, like partly on the NATO flag.
Of course.
But you do see like a trend of the US building down their presence in the Western Balkans. In favor of a stronger EU presence. It's not like they're just leaving it as a vacuum. It's like they're transferring that responsibility more towards the EU slowly. But yeah, I think like one of the things we might because I know you want to go to the questions too, don't you?
No,
you want to talk about? Oh no,
no, I don't want to answer those questions. No, I'm joking.
Oh, okay, you want to talk because I think
guys, we'll answer those questions. Don't worry.
Maybe before we go to the questions, like a last takeaway about the issue, because like we're going through it very very like broad right now. It's a very difficult and complicated issue, but I think it would be good for people, like especially to people who live in the EU, who listen to our podcast. Like it would be very good to like have a look at what happens the coming few months when it comes to enlargement, read some stuff about it, and let's see what you can do maybe, because in my opinion, like there needs to be more pressure on the Western, like at least the Dutch government, French government, Danish government, to make headway with EU accession.
That's our opinion, but we know that a large part of the EU, well, not most, but a significant part of the population is against it. Like,
that's not true. It's actually, when they did the last EU barometer, it was only 55% who is against and 45% in favor. So it's a small majority, very small,
but significant. That's what I said.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
so it's very significant. So
okay, fair. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. So make sure that if you do support the EU, let's say give the Western Balkans like a good a push. Let's say the EU give the EU a push towards the Western Balkans,
and just talk about it. It's an issue that needs to be talked about and needs attention.
Yeah, for sure. So also one thing, of course, if you're listening to the podcast, you have an opinion on this issue, send it in. We're listening to our social media channels. So if you have a question or you just want to say something, whatever, send us a message on Facebook or on Instagram, and we'll take it with us. It'll come back somehow.
But yeah, I hope it's been enlightening a bit about the current situation, what's happening right now.
Yeah. So maybe we can move to the questions, because I mean, like we said at the start, we're very happy that people actually responded. So to all our listeners, thank you.
Thank you. We chose 3 questions to do. So
we had a couple. We chose 3.
Yeah.
And you just want to go
one by one? Yeah, sure. Like so the first question we got from Armin. So thank you very much, Armin.
Armin, thank you so much. Yeah.
And he asked, what are the advantages of having an office in the Western Balkans for IT companies? And specifically about the infrastructure. So
the advantages of of IT companies in the Western Balkans.
Well, for IT companies.
For IT.
So if you were an IT company who was looking to open up office in, let's say, Skopje, so what would be the benefits?
So I can tell you the benefits of, from what I've seen, of opening up shop in the Western Balkans, in one of those countries there, as compared to other very popular outsourcing places, right? So a very popular one is India. Is very popular with countries. There's a lot of big and very good and established companies from around the world outsourcing in India, especially when it comes to European countries, companies from European countries. If you work with the Western Balkans, you have the advantage of it being the same time zone, the culture being very similar. Basically, it's really close. So you're there within 2 hours max, often sooner, like faster, by plane. So you can go over there yourself really fast, or have your engineers or developers fly over to you really fast. The countries are, of course, relatively economically feasible when compared to prices in Western Europe, let's say. So if you choose to do that, obviously this is compared to Western Europe. Other Eastern European countries, especially those that have joined the EU, have in recent years already seen an increase in prices, because an increase of living standards, an increase of everything meant that the prices of their services went up as well. So that happened In Poland 20, 15 years ago, a lot of outsourcing happened there. It still does. So just to be clear, a lot of it still happens there. But the prices have gone up, and we have seen a lot of good companies in the Western Balkans that are of world-class quality. And they're not any worse. They're sometimes even better than countries in other Eastern Europe, companies in other Eastern European countries, while the prices are still competitive. So I think we I think we talked to a business service business network a few months ago, and they were actually from Poland. I don't remember the name, but
I remember also.
Doesn't matter. But we had a conversation with them, and they opened up shop for the first time in Bosnia. They're originally from Poland. They were a long time in Poland, a long time in Czech Republic, Czechia, in Romania, I think, as well. And then they opened in Bosnia to make us enter into the Western Balkans, because basically the guy said, well, this is the last place in Europe that can offer these prices for the quality. So when it comes to infrastructure, I mean,
you have everything you need.
You have everything you need.
Yeah.
You're close by. You got, internet. You can get everything you need. People,
and you have
people there are young, educated,
exactly.
motivated. They want to make money, because the standards aren't as great everywhere. So especially when it comes to like the bigger cities, young people, IT is very popular. So you'll get people that want to work, make a living doing IT for you.
Yeah.
So
good. Good.
I mean, this is
your game.
This is my game, I would say.
Very good.
So once again, just to make clear, like, I'm not dissing or against outsourcing anywhere else. Just for it to be clear for our listeners.
But please do it in the Western Balkans.
But please consider doing it in the Western Balkans. Yeah. At least have a look there, because there's a lot of potential, especially like, I mean, this is just pushing ourselves like to the forefront, but we have a lot of contacts with a lot of companies. If you're interested in this, let us know.
You're so modest.
Man, look, I'm just being real.
You're so modest and laid back. It's unbelievable.
It is, yeah.
How can I ever match this?
You will never.
I will never. And I have accepted this a long time ago.
Right. So, Armin, I hope with this, your question is answered. Once again, thank you so much for this question. We'll send you a message so you'll listen to the podcast and share it with your friends. So maybe the next question.
The lady,
the lady Neda, she asked us about the banks, and maybe you can answer this question.
Yeah,
so you know some about this. What was the question?
Yeah, so Neda asked, why are there so many different banks in Sarajevo, and is it legal? And if it's not legal, why not? So good question. It's something that also is on top of my mind. So I'm going to pull it a bit bigger, though. Like, let's say just Bosnia and Herzegovina, not just Sarajevo. But Sarajevo is also, of course, where the most banks will be. So the reason why I know why this is the way it is, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm quite sure I'm not wrong, is that because when, of course, like in former Yugoslavia, you had a whole banking infrastructure, there were banks everywhere, but it was all government owned. Banks were not private. And when the system fell apart, the war happened, blah, 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 we all know it. After the war, a lot of, there was no own banking system and no players who tried to set this up in a large scale, because a lot of foreign players came in to buy up parts of that infrastructure. So a lot of foreign players like, the Unicredit Bank, Raiffeisen Bank, Sberbank, banks like BBI come from Saudi Arabia later on. You see a lot of different banks from different parts of the world who came in, who either bought up certain parts of the infrastructure or opened up their own bank for a certain segment of the population, which is something you see more broadly. But with the banks, it's very prominent, because you have, like, I think Unicredit is like Italian, so they went in from that side. You have like Raiffeisen, and we're like Austrian, I think.
Swiss, maybe.
No, I'm quite sure they're Austrian, okay. But okay, fair enough. and you have another Austrian player. You have Spare, which is from Russia. So you have like all these other players who came in who also have like certain geopolitical interest a bit, like matching with certain groups, and that's something which clashes in Bosnia, of course, as it has done more often in history.
Clashes is a strong word. It's not really clashing now. It's more of a strong competition.
Yeah, but like historically it has clashed a few times, and that's like the geopolitical divides, etc., internally and systematically and whatever. But that's the reason why it's so segregated, because there's no central putting it together, and there are no takeovers, etc., happening, because they're also tied to foreign banks. So that's why you have this weird construct of having like way too many banks for population.
You do have a central bank in Bosnia.
Yeah, there is still the Bosnian bank, of course, like the central federal bank.
Yeah,
but they are not the biggest player, and they are not private. So, that's why you have so many private players.
Exactly.
So that's the reason which I know why all these banks are.
One part of the question is it legal?
Oh yeah, I think it's legal. But of course, but like you can't. Like you can have an opinion about it, but like very simply said, it's still private sector and market, so you can't
it's basically
prohibit them from opening. Like if I want to open up a bank tomorrow in Bosnia, I can. The question is if I'm going to get customers. But when you appeal to a certain segment of the population, and everybody does that, and you have no really wide banks, you have a few, but not. It's easier to keep it going, like enough to be. Sustainable, but never to be able to grow enough so you could take over the others. So you get like some kind of weird.
So basically, it seems to me like after the war, there was a vacuum. It was a free for all. Like it was basically. It's now settling. But after the war, a lot of this financial infrastructure didn't exist. Like a lot of other infrastructure didn't exist. So it was like this. Anarchy, this libertarian paradise or free market. Open up your own bank. Everybody open their own bank. Come in.
It were foreign ones who came in who bought all the infrastructure.
Come in and open everybody had their own bank.
Yeah.
Basically. And now it's settling in. You have the players and so on. So maybe that's one part that, like you mentioned, a lot of people came in, private, foreign, whatever, loads of banks, but it's all legal because it was just the outcome of the situation as it was in the 90s, basically. To answer your question, Neda, I hope that you are enlightened by our wisdom.
If you don't agree, let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments. Leave a like.
Yeah. So
thank you so much for your question, Neda.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we have a final question as well.
From our dear good friend.
Oh, our number one, our first podcast ever. Go back, listen to it.
Episode 1, season 1.
Amer Grgic. We can say his name, right? Because it's Bits versus Bytes.
Bits versus Bytes podcast. Check it out.
Check it out. It's a technology podcast. He's in the 70 something episode now, so he has made quite a few episodes already. It's always with business people or CEOs or CTOs or whatever in some sector of technology. It's a really good podcast. Check him out. Amer, thank you for the question. Sandro, what was the question?
Amer asked us, what do you think is one thing that needs to happen for a positive change in the Balkans? So, if you have 2 hours, we can
settle in, folks.
Settle in. But
one thing, we have to choose one thing.
One thing would, for me, be the topic of today: EU accession. If the Western Balkan
that's
countries,
actually a lot of things that need to happen.
Okay, but like
a lot of things need to happen for that to happen.
That is true. That is true. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Let's see. I think, so maybe to make it more personal, like to pull it back more a bit to the people. I think that this is like one thing that I in generally would say to anybody everywhere at all times. And that's taking ownership of your own destiny and your own future. I'm going to be very motivational speaker right now, but I really think that the best change which can happen is if people just look around at the opportunities they do have.
Opportunities
around them and even in neighboring countries, but just to, take, manifest destiny, to put it in US terms, just to go ahead and create your own future. Yeah, you got to put the US flag down. Very good. But I think that's, I think that's one of no, but that's a serious answer. Like, I think that is very important because I can imagine a lot of, like, especially younger kids in the Western Balkans growing up can get disheartened about the outlook for in some countries and some parts where they live. And then, if you're like listening and watching this podcast, like my message for you will be, and like you could say, okay, it's easy for you to talk from the Netherlands, but still, like, you have to take destiny of your own future and try to make the most of it and take ownership of what you're doing and try to make the best of it and just work hard. And I think that's something, and I think that's the mentality which a lot of Balkan people have, but every day more people can use it. And I think when people internalize this, they can do anything. So I think that's very much my motivational moment of the podcast. Like that's just my core business in general, anyways. But
motivating people.
Well, just being taking ownership of my own future.
Taking ownership.
But in a few years, I will be a professional motivational speaker, of course.
Yeah, we will write a book and all that and sell it to you on a course online.
This is so 2008.
Exactly.
But okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but that's a good answer. So the one thing that needs to happen is that, let's say not the majority, but a critical mass of people in the Balkans change their mentality on life.
On what's possible.
So once you reach a critical mass, a lot of things will start to happen. Because if people live the way you describe them to live, like taking ownership of their own life, their decisions, and despite the political system, despite the schools, despite the roads, despite all these things, because nobody's saying that these things aren't bad or shit or whatever, right? They are. But despite all of these things, there's going to be opportunities and chances, and your mindset needs to be, I'm going to take these chances and I'm going to make the best out of them. And when, let's say 10, 15% of the population does that, you're going to have a critical mass and things are going to change. Yeah. And I think, actually, said this before, I'm going to say it again, I'm sorry. You're starting to see this happening with the younger generation in a lot of places. Not everybody, obviously, a lot of people still leaving, brain drain is still a big problem. But it's happening, and it's really cool to see with the startups and the young entrepreneurs and the motive. It's awesome.
Everything,
yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that's. But apart from the motivational, Amer, if you want a really concrete answer about one thing, I would say rule of law. Also, one of the parts I mentioned for the EU reforms. Rule of law needs to be enforced, and you need certain judicial standards. If you have that, a lot will fall into line if it wants to, or if it doesn't want to. That's the whole point with the law. It doesn't matter what you think, you have to do certain things. So that's also important. But yeah, I stay with ownership.
Ownership. So maybe that's a good point to actually start, leave our listeners with.
Yeah, sure.
Let's have a short recap. I think we said a lot of things, and to be honest, I think we said a lot of things that'll be very high over for a lot of people, but it's okay. So we wanted to inform. We wanted to have the discussion with you. We wanted to make sure that there's more attention on these things in the Balkans, outside of the Balkans, on stimulating the Balkan countries joining the EU and why it's important. And, I think we did a decent job with this podcast. Hopefully, I hope you like it. I hope you don't hate it.
Yeah, and I just really want to invite people to just read more on the topic, because there's so much to read about it, and there's so many things happening right now which people are not seeing, because especially if you're living in Western European countries or the US, like Western Balkans isn't sexy. It isn't, EU enlargement negotiations in the Western Balkans are not sexy, but they are very important for our future. So I would very much encourage people to read more about it. And if you read, I could do a 3-hour special by myself on this topic. So
please don't.
Yeah, please don't. Leave in the comments if you want me to, but
zero comments.
Zero comments. Yeah, but it is really important, and I really think people should pay attention to it. And I hope that you at least that your interest has been piqued a bit about what we talked about. So yeah that's my
awesome
takeaway.
So let's leave it at that. I mean, thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And Sani, I'll see you next interesting topic.
You'll see me in like 10 seconds after this recording stops.
Yeah, that's true. But
so let's just wrap it up there. Thank you, guys. Thank you once again for the people asking the questions. So
yeah,
Armin, Neda, and Amer, thank you for your questions, and everybody else that send in their comments and questions. Stay tuned. Send them in next time, and we'll answer them the best that we can.
Yes,
so that's it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, see you later.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Balkan Talks. Don't forget to follow the Western Balkans Business Group on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and at WBBG Official on Instagram. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a positive review and follow our podcast to stay up to date on all our future uploads. You might also want to check out any of the other episodes of the Balkan Talks, which are available online. If you would like to learn more about the Western Balkans and all the opportunities that exist in the region, please contact WBBG at www.wbbusinessgroup.com. WBBG, Connecting the Balkans.